Hello, welcome to our podcast, Beyond the Booth. My name is Idan Blecker, my co-host Eric Morais. Um, Eric, how you doing?
I'm perfectly done. It's good to be here. First episode of the podcast. We thought we should just give a quick introduction just about us, why we're doing this. So I feel like we're just two guys who love football, love talking about it. It could be the players, the storylines, the coaches, the X's and O's, just love getting into it each week just on the phone with each other. So I thought, why not just put it on a platform? Let's make something out of it, and I feel like this will be a real good time.
Yeah, dude, I'm really excited. Obviously we've been talking about football together on the phone with what feels like, basically 8 years now. Eric's a really smart guy, and I think, we both know a lot about ball, and I'm excited to do this. So Yeah, I think our vision for this program is basically going to be to give you guys, or to give ourselves really. I don't know exactly who this is going to go to, but just give us some storylines that are just go a little bit beyond, um, a lot of the kind of the way the current media does sports media, which is, a lot of clickbaits, a lot of like hot takes. We really want to dive into, some really important topics, which you'll see today, and also some topics that maybe don't seem as consequential, but still matter a lot, to some true football fans. So this is exciting stuff. So Eric, should we jump into
Yeah,
the first thing here?
let's get right into it. So, Idan, I've got some news for the week. This first thing I need to get your thoughts on. So, it was announced earlier today, Brian Dable, Jackson Dart is not only getting the start
Mhm.
for this week, Giants against Chargers, but he was named the starter for the rest of the season. What are your first reactions? Is this the right move? Is this premature? 0-3 start. Russ lasting image of him throwing the ball into the tunnel
Yeah.
on third and fourth down there, hitting the crossbar. So what are we thinking?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that's definitely the storyline of the week. And it's funny when the season began. Russ is, if he's a Hall of Famer or not, you can have that debate, but he's an incredibly accomplished quarterback in our time. And what's actually funny enough is Russ is one of the first, rookie starters that there were. Really, it was him, and I forget who the other guy was, but basically he was the initial guy who was right out of college, franchise quarterback. And obviously that's had a lot of implications for the league. Uh, I think it's funny when the season started. Obviously, Russ was the starter, but it felt like really a question of when, not if, Jackson Dart would get the start. This was a week that people were talking about as a potential first week. Uh, it's not going to be an easy week, but I think just generally, I think you see a lot of great things from Dart. I think he played very well in the preseason. I think he's shown flashes. He obviously was good enough in college to get drafted in the first round. Um, I think from the football fan perspective, I'm excited to see him. I'm excited to see what could become of Dart more than what we know of Russ, which is that he's not washed, but he doesn't really understand what he's doing on the football field still. Is he trying to win games or not? We don't even really understand that. So I think in terms of football fan to me, I'm excited to see it. But I think in terms of the football kind of critic in me and what I would want for my team, uh, I think it's a bit premature. Russ week two had a sensational game, a high scoring game with the Cowboys. And at the end of the day, he scored, I forget exactly what it was, but I think he scored in the 40s or the 30s, something like that. Um, I think it's just a question of, are you doing this because of pressure? Are you doing this because you feel like you need to save your job as Dable? Or is it that you actually think Dart is the better quarterback, which is possible, I guess. Um, and then in terms of what you said, the second thing, which is, he's starting the whole season, I actually happen to think that's maybe a better plan than just making him a starter for this week. I think it shows a lot of trust in your rookie quarterback, rather than him going out there and feeling like if he messes up, he's going to get pulled, which I know from experience as a Jets fan that never goes well ever. Um, I think Dart can go out there now and kind of do what he does, which is, ball out and play with like kind of not a lot of pressure and play loose and play fast. So I'm excited to see what he does this week. But In general, Eric, I got to be honest, I'm not a big fan of starting rookie quarterbacks. I think it's a lost art of benching a rookie, letting him learn. What do you think about this? What do you think about this?
So I agree with you on almost every point there, except for the fact that I think that Dart, he's done. I think if you look between April when he's drafted and today, from my perspective, it seems like he's done everything right. He has had glowing reviews inside the building. He played extremely well when he had the chance in preseason. Yeah, he's playing against eventual twos, threes, sometimes plumbers, guys who, their football careers are over. But you also think like there's a difference in speed and the style of game going from Ole Miss to the NFL, and the game didn't look too fast for him. The physical tools were translating. There's that clip of Gruden doing his QB camp or video with Dart. This guy's never lined up under center. This guy's only ever clapped for his snap cadence. Like, it's a totally different adjustment. So I think he's had a, good off season sitting. He's looked ready. Um, so I think that this was the right move for the Giants. I mean, if you think about like Dable having Josh Allen as his previous quarterback back in Buffalo, it's not a perfect comparison by any means, but you think about like the size, the ability to get out on the move. I feel like this opens up their offense. If anything, that hopefully this gives some Giants fans a little bit of hope. I'm super curious to see how he does. I don't know if it's going to pay off this week or even next couple weeks. I mean, their schedule is horrific. I don't
Hmm.
know how a last place team gets this kind of schedule. Like it's extremely unlucky, but
Yeah.
I'm actually relatively bullish on him throughout the course of this year. So I don't know. I mean, Chargers 3-0. I know they've had some injuries on defense, but I feel like that's a tough ask. Keep an eye out
Yeah.
for Saints in week 5 because I feel like that could be a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna figure out though, can this kid play or not? I mean, yeah, it's gonna be a tough game to win, but it doesn't mean that's necessarily gonna be a tough game to like look good.
Yeah.
And I think that he's gonna look good and it's gonna be exciting and you get the shiny new toy and that's great. I just think the question I have is the goal here to win football games? And is Russ preventing that? And yeah, Russ looked bad in the last game. He did. He looked really bad. But do you really think that Russell Wilson, who has been there, who has done it at the highest levels, yeah, he's not at the top of his game, he's not even close, but you know, is this just appeasement, right? You have Dable, who, his job's not particularly safe, and you have the GM whose job is not particularly safe, and this may really be like we have the quarterback. Look, he's playing so well. Let's stay, like, let us stay here now. Um, but I agree with you completely, by the way, that I think Dart has done everything right. Every single part of the pre-draft process, the draft process, OTAs, everything he's handled with absolute grace, and he's taken every advantage, every opportunity he could to do well. So, I'm really excited to see what he does here. Um, in other news, Eric, you are a Texans fan, and something also
Yes,
happened
sir.
this week with the Texans with CJ Gardner Johnson. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the lasting impression, one of the lasting impressions of the Texans falling to 0-3 was the Jags. They're driving down tie game. Trevor Lawrence hits Brian Thomas Jr., who for some reason can't catch anything thrown at him, but he caught this. I think it was a dig route or some kind of deep crossing route. Miscommunication in the secondary takes that leads to the game-winning touchdown just to play later. There have been miscommunications in the secondary through from what's been outside of these miscommunications, a really, really good defense. I'd say championship caliber defense, but there have been these lapses. And if you look at the film, you turn the tape on, CJ Gardner Johnson has been at the root of every single one of them. So I think when you start 0-3, despite having playoff and AFC championship level aspirations, you have a guy who's new to the system, who is not adapting, who report Texans beat writers are saying is causing a ruckus in the locker room, talking about other players' contracts, talking about his role in the defense, not making changes in terms of this communication. This is something that D'Amico, the Texans coach, has stressed as a really pressing issue for the
Mhm.
team, alongside the fact that the team just can't score touchdowns right now. Like there's zero offensive momentum drive to drive. But I think yeah, is this the root of the Texans' issues? No. But you look past the name, you look past Super Bowl champion, you look at like has he been playing well? Has he been helping this team win games? And I'd argue absolutely not. So
Yeah.
I think this is the right move. This also comes a day after Jimmy Ward, the Texan safety I'd argue his best days are behind him, but he was just reinstated by the league after some domestic violence and drug-related
Yeah.
controversy this offseason. So we'll see. Next man up. Um,
Mhm. Who is that X Man up? Is it Jimmy Ward?
well, I think Ward's going to play there, but also I believe MJ Stewart, who he's bounced around the league for a little while, is gonna be up there. So look, I think the secondary, the corners are real strong.
Yeah.
You look at the deeper into the secondary, like the safety. I mean, we've got playmakers like Kalen Bullock, Ball Hawk, Petrie, who's really strong when playing at the line of scrimmage or in and
Mhm.
around there. So I think there are guys there. This hurts depth most doubt like undoubtedly, but I think given the result on the field in the last 3 weeks, this was the right move.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. And, it's not necessarily like a recent trend, but I think it is something notable that, it just happened with, my Jets week one actually, is that, a player lost us the game. A player has been losing games. And instead of putting up with it, a coaching staff decides to cut them. Um, what do you think, like, how do you think, like, what's your interpretation of how this reflects on the coaches, on the locker room, et cetera? Do you think this reflects strength and a unified locker room, or do you think reflects a little bit of chaos maybe going on in Texans facility?
It's a great question. So I don't know exactly what the players have been saying, but I think this reflects well on management, on Nick Caserio, on D'Amico. I think they see that, yeah, there are several issues with the team, but we just got to address it one by one. And what's been happening there, whether it's the lapses in communication, not playing, not sticking to your role on several key drives, key moments, that alongside whatever's been going on in the locker room, it's only rumors that I've heard or read about, but whatever's been going on there, there is a line, there is a standard, there is an element of the team, the logo, that the name on the front mattering more than the name on the back. I think that, something like that, I mean, rest of the players who I'm not saying would necessarily be doing the same things that CJ Garner Johnson's doing, but like
Yeah.
I think other players say that and say, you know, not the start we wanted, but there's a standard, there's accountability, and we're taking the steps there.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I have a
yeah,
question back to you because
sure.
I know you're just referencing Aaron Glenn and Muji
Mhm.
cutting Xavier Gibson after the costly week one fumble. Like,
Yeah.
how do you interpret something like that? That's hard to get into a situation, a close game, really costly fumble.
Mhm.
What do you think about that in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I was there. I get to see it live, and it's been a conversation of not the same old Jets, not the same old Jets. That was the same old Jets I've been watching for 15 years. There comes a point where the game gets close and real teams find ways to win, that the Jets find ways to lose. And that was just one example in a million. But I think it's interesting with Xavier Gibson. Obviously, 2 years ago he made the play against the Bills, and that's been, I mean, it's probably one of the best plays of my lifetime as a Jets fan. But I think, for me, it reflects very well on Glenn and the coaching staff that they cut him. Because I think his play, not only in that game, but the last few seasons, has been completely unacceptable. And almost more than I think it reflects well on Glenn. Honestly, I think it reflects really poorly on Muji, the GM. Um, this is a guy in Gibson who the fans knew does things like this. He does things like this all the time. Every time he returns a ball, you have a heart attack. And I think it's just remarkable to me that you had a lot of guys in Jets camp, a lot of receivers, a lot of promising undrafted receivers who can do similar things to Gibson, like Pritchett and so on, that that Gibson made this roster and lost us a game. He lost us a game. I think he would but again, so again, to answer your question, I think it reflects really well on Glenn. I'm really happy about it. I think he's setting a tone early. But, to be honest, I've never really been someone who says that play lost us a game. I think obviously that play
Except for
was
right there.
very consequential. Like do we win that game if he doesn't do that? Maybe. But again, I think there were a lot of issues with the Steelers game. I think the fact that the defense couldn't stop a bloody nose that entire game, or as a matter of fact, this entire season, is probably a bigger issue than anything Gibson did on one play. Um, but overall, I think he had to go. Absolutely had to go, and him sticking
It was
around would have been
time.
a worse message than him going as being a good message.
Yeah, it was time. Well, speaking of Aaron Glenn there, first year head coach, I feel like in the offseason there was a lot about send the culture and expectations weren't necessarily the highest for the Jets in terms
Mhm.
of, wins and losses, but you're at 0 and 3.
Yep.
You're coming to Raymond James Stadium in Tampa Bay, 0 and 2, what's nearly an incredible comeback win. But I thought maybe the funniest or craziest moment from that game was Aaron Glenn's celebration going down the sidelines after the blocked kick. You compare that to someone like I don't know, Jalen Hurts whenever they had that walk-off touchdown against the Rams, stoic, no
Mhm.
impression.
Yeah.
What do you think about your coach, the leader of men, going crazy down the sideline,
Yeah.
living his best life, doing it all there?
Yeah, I think it feels like every offseason as a Jets fan, right? We say, okay, well, I guess the last two have been different, but it's really been this is a building year. Expectations are not high, whatever. And then the first game comes and everything falls down. And it's why aren't we winning games now? Why are we not winning games now? Why isn't the quarterback looking good now? If you can get beyond that and you can appreciate that this is the first three games of what hopefully is a decade-long relationship between the Jets and Aaron Glenn, right? Hopefully he's the franchise coach we've been waiting for. Like that could be the case. And you can understand that this roster is bad. The roster is not good. It has good players, but it's not constructed well yet. I think Muji took on a team that lost a lot of very good players. Losing Aaron Rodgers was a downgrade. Losing Devontae Adams, who arguably was, I thought, one of the most productive Jets last year, was a downgrade. Losing CJ Mosley has been a catastrophic downgrade on the defense. I mean, we miss him. It's unbelievable what's going on. So if you can accept those two things, I think I'm honestly I'm very okay with it. You have a guy who's worked his entire life to get to this point. From the scouting department, was before that as a player to the scouting department to positional coach to coordinator, then to head coach at his old team. I think if he's not excited to win games, then what are we doing? I want a guy who is a leader of men, like you said, and who players respect. But I also want a guy who's, genuine. And I think that he's a genuine guy. I don't think he holds anything back. Um, in terms of him celebrating before the game's over, listen, this is a guy who, again, who saw his first win coming. His first win in the NFL, he saw it coming. Like, how are you gonna hate on him for being excited? Um, but like definitely listen, is it embarrassing? Is it a classic Jets moment? Like maybe just because we lost and he's a defensive coach and the defense couldn't get a game-winning stop. But I don't like personally have an issue with it. I think if he wants to celebrate and he wants to be happy, I'm happy for him. Like I think it's great. Like he's doing what he set out to do probably 15 years ago. And I think as long as he believes the team is taking the steps in the direction to become a winning organization, I'm fine with whatever he wants to do.
Yeah. Personally, I love it. I thought it was, I mean, it's at that point, it's the biggest play of the game. Game-changing moment for a team that's looking for its first win, for a team that, yeah, there's some veterans, but a lot of like young core players. I feel like from all reports that you've seen, he's been on their ass all off season, all camp, everything. Like I thought it was cool. So I
Yeah, I mean, and I
yeah,
think, but again, right? It's funny. I was talking to my friend who's a Bears fan, and it's so true. It reminds me of that scene from Step Brothers when they go into the office for the job interview, and they're
yeah.
wearing the suits, right? And I forget who the actor was, but he goes, "Oh, it was Seth Rogen." Seth Rogen goes, "At first, I thought it was kind of cool, and now I just think it's fucked up." Like, this whole tough guy thing, and for Ben Johnson, the whole like nerdy football thing, it looks really cool, and it's really like, oh, it's so aura, it's so cool, until it's not, right? Until you start losing games and the team falls apart. And so for me, I don't care if he is a dog or a cat or an alien. Like if the Jets are winning football games, I'm Aaron Glenn's biggest fan. Um, and I think you have seen some productive things. Week two was great. I'm sorry, week one was great. Week one was great. To watch week one
Week
was
two though.
excellent. Week two was a disaster. I mean, it, and yeah, I mean that's the week two was a nightmare. I mean, this team just hasn't looked ready to play football 2 weeks in a row now, but hopefully we can turn that around.
Yeah.
Um, so obviously we have week four coming up, which is crazy. I can't believe how quickly the
Already.
season's going. Like,
First month.
what is going on? Like, we're basically a quarter of the way through the season, and I feel like I haven't even registered. Are there any games this week that you're kind of looking at as maybe, important, like fun to watch in its own right, but maybe more like important in the grander scheme of what's going on in the NFL?
I've got a again great question. I've got my eye on Colts Rams. You look at these are two teams who, I think there were expectations for the Rams coming into this year, but some uncertainty about Stafford's back.
Yeah,
From everything that we've seen, he's held up and he's shaking off some of the rust after not getting as many reps in camp as he
he
normally
looks
will.
great. I mean, he looks
Yeah,
great.
he
He
looks
looks
great.
really good. Yeah.
You know, Puka and Tay are dangerous as ever, and
Yeah.
they've got some real nice young players on that defense, particularly up front, getting after the quarterback.
Mhm.
And then you look at the Colts, who I'd argue are up there as one of, if not the most surprising team of this season.
Yeah.
You look at in the off season, everyone's talking about this is like the QB competition from hell, like Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones.
Mhm.
Both of whom had, just last year some like horrific, lasting memories left on their respective fan bases. So like you think about like, okay, it's a solid like you don't see a lot of elite talent throughout the rest of the roster, but it's nicely built, top to bottom. Like they're deep, not as many real weaknesses. Um, but you look at what Daniel Jones has done in that scheme, behind the offensive line with those weapons, just how efficiently they're moving the ball with just I can't remember the exact number of times, but they've hardly ever had to punt. So
I think it's
you look
one
at
punt. It maybe is it possible it's one punt or something like that?
I knew through the first 2 weeks there were no punts, which is
I think they punted
insane,
once this week. I swear. I
insane.
think it was one punt.
So I look at these two teams. This isn't like a Super Bowl preview by any means,
Yeah.
but I think this is a real litmus test early in the season. How good are the Colts actually? Because I think we know, the Rams are legit. Come early, mid-January, late January even, they're going to be in the conversation. They're going to be playing in big games. But the Colts, I think no one really, unless you're living in downtown Indy, like no one really saw them living up to this capacity early in the season. But at the same time, with the Colts, you look at the teams they've played and their cumulative record so far, and I think they have one win between them. So it's like, and that's the Broncos, and there's controversy about how that game even ended. So
Mhm.
how legit are the Colts actually whenever they're going up against a team that has been competitive, that won a Super Bowl in recent memory, that
Yeah.
gave the defending champs not just a run for their money in January, but gave them all that they were worth just last week. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see where these two teams stack up. So
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
definitely, I think it's a huge game, and I agree with everything you said. This is a major prove it week for the Colts. I think they're 3-0. They've looked great, but there's still a part of me that says this is Daniel Jones and this is the Colts and this is the team that personally I thought would be one of the worst in the NFL, let alone one of the best.
yeah,
It's interesting. I'm looking at actually their schedule coming up, and I gotta tell you, it's like really not that bad at all. I mean, they have the Rams this week, the Colts, I mean, the Raiders next week, who are who are not a great team, the Cardinals, who are not a great team, the Chargers have been playing well, the Titans
Titans
have
are
not a
good.
great team, the Steelers are suspect, the Falcons are suspect, the Chiefs have been very suspect, which we'll get to later. The Texans, I'm sorry, have looked suspect. Like they have some winnable games here, and I think if they can get a statement win this week, I mean, are we talking about the Colts like literally being a dark horse? Like, is this at what point does the
Yeah,
conversation turn to that, you know?
yeah,
Um, but I completely agree with you. I mean, listen, I think they've had three very easy games. Very easy games. I mean, the Broncos are a good team who have been underperforming this year greatly. And yeah, like you said, that ended in controversy. But, the Dolphins have looked like the worst team in football. The Titans have looked, have a rookie quarterback, and that hasn't really been looking great so far. So, I think this is a huge game on the road as well. I don't know what Vegas has the spread after this, but surely the Rams are favorites. And, I think we'll be having a very, very different conversation about Daniel Jones one way or another after Sunday.
yeah.
Um,
This just reminds me, last year Sam Darnold kind of came out of the blue a little bit. He went
yeah,
to, Kevin O'Connell's like rehabilitation center for quarterbacks,
yeah.
and everyone's waiting for him to turn into a pumpkin, which, he did like week 18. But,
In the
weeks one
playoffs as
through,
well, he didn't look great.
yeah, weeks 1 through 17,
He was an
like who
MVP
who
candidate, like
who
literally.
who would have seen that coming? Like a bump
Yeah,
in year 7.
yeah.
I think Daniel Jones is in like year, 6, more or less, somewhere in that range, 6 or 7. So
Six or
like,
seven, yeah.
but but
Well, I have a question for you quickly,
yeah,
before we move on. I think it's really interesting if you think about how this preseason went down with the Colts, in that, Anthony Richardson was their top pick not too long ago, and he was the presumptive starter, I think. I mean, it was a QB controversy for sure. It was a competition, but he was out there with the first team in the preseason. What does that say about this whole situation? Do you think maybe the Colts weren't even expecting this to happen?
I think they brought in Daniel Jones as, competition for a guy Anthony Richardson, who he'd seen some serious ups and downs. I think if you talk about availability as being the best ability,
Mhm.
he just he wasn't taking care of himself, whether it was being smart about when he's running and what kind of hits he should be taking. I believe he took a big hit in the preseason because he didn't check into the right protection and just let a free rusher come right at him.
Yep.
Something like that, like you can't be a franchise's starting quarterback for 17 games and for what they hope to be a Super Bowl run if you can't be available, if you can't stay on the field, let alone play well when you're on the field. So
Yeah.
I think with Daniel Jones coming in, I think that that brings in a level of, I don't want to say reassurance, but it's like, okay, more or less what you're getting. It hasn't been great, but we saw flashes and the Giants' most recent playoff run. So like, if you can keep him up on 2 feet, if behind a good offensive line with a great running back, we've seen what he can do. So
Yeah.
I think there was an element of like, bring him in, let's compete, see how it shakes out. And in the end, I don't think it ended up being close, based off of what I saw right in camp. Um,
Yeah, I
but
mean, I think it's interesting to think about Daniel Jones' trajectory. I mean, this isn't a Sam Darnold or a Baker Mayfield where, these guys were out before their contracts. This guy signed a second contract with the Giants after winning a playoff game. Um, and like you said, you've seen flashes of productivity from him. When you think about, and maybe this is a conversation for another time, but thinking about the impact that a head coach has on a rookie quarterback or a young quarterback,
Absolutely.
It's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable to see some of these players come back from looking horrendous as young players. I mean, the Baker Mayfield story is should be an episode all in
Unbelievable.
itself. I mean, this guy was running defensive scout team. I can't even believe that. And now he looks like you could make an argument he's top four. Like there's certainly an argument to be made for that.
He's
So
playing right now,
listen,
yeah.
so we'll see where Daniel Jones goes in the future.
Yeah.
Um, Eric, I'm not going to be as nuanced as you or as smart. I'm going to take my game of the week just to be what everyone thinks the game of the week is, which is the Chiefs versus the Ravens. Um, I think it's the game of the week for me, not because I think it's going to be the best game, but I think it's a game that's going to tell us a lot about where the AFC is going this season. Right. And I think you've seen now a sample size large enough to say that the Chiefs don't look good or they don't look like themselves, right? They don't look like their dominant selves. And you kind of get this feeling late in games that Mahomes will figure it out, right? Mahomes will find a way to win, but it just kind of hasn't been happening, right? They didn't figure it out week one. They didn't figure it out week two. And then week three, they played the Giants and frankly, they almost lost. Like they could have lost that game to the Giants, who just made a
Yep.
quarterback change. So I'm really interested to see what happens with the Chiefs this week. They're getting Worthy back, I believe, and
Hmm.
he's going to be a major piece for them for sure. They're very weak at receiver right now, but I got to tell you, I don't really know what to make of the Chiefs right now, and I think that this week will give me a lot of information. This is a team that, I mean, they made the Super Bowl last year. Like they have
Past
been
three
a
years.
they've they've been a dynasty of our lifetime. Like full stop.
Hmm.
And it kind of gives me flashbacks to that one year that Brady was suspended when he came back from the suspension and then just dominated, just could not be stopped and won a Super Bowl. And it's like, yeah, obviously Mahomes is still there, but it's almost like, will they be able to figure out a way to turn it around? And I think if they're gonna, it's this week. You can't go 1-3 in this league and be then it starts to be like you have to win out to make the playoffs. And they're not in an easy division either. So it really becomes a question of, if you don't win this week, it's like, what are the solutions? And then for the Ravens, they look great. They look great as always. I think they've been a great regular season team for a long time now. Um, I think that they had a tough loss to the Lions for sure, who I think people were overreacting to week one as a bad team. But, I want to see the Ravens come out and just whack the Chiefs. I want to see them have a statement win of their own right, saying that this isn't the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. This is now. And this is their opportunity to take the step. I think Hopkins has been more productive than people thought he would be. I think Derrick Henry, counted to the seasons people count him out. He's still a freak.
Ball security.
Um, but I mean, that was unbelievable. But he's still a great player, and yeah, that's a concern. But I mean, if you watch the play, like at the end of the day, I think 9 out of 10 running backs, 10 out of 10 running backs are fumbling that ball.
Yeah.
It was a perfect punch out from Hutchinson. Perfect punch out, and it's more of a kudos to Hutchinson than a downplay, like than a negative for King Henry. Um, but again, this is a great week for them to put that all behind them, get a big win against the Chiefs, and just, finally try to make that push for a Lombardi, which it feels like they've just been coming short every year now. And at some point, you kind of gotta like do it.
Yeah.
You have any thoughts on the game?
I thought you said a lot of good stuff there that I'm on the same page as. The matchup I want to see most is the Ravens defense and the Chiefs offense. The Ravens defense, you know, week two, yeah, you're playing the Browns, but you look at week one on the road in Buffalo, you look at week three at home primetime environment. I mean, some of the drives just the other night, like letting up a 95 and then a 98-yard drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Lions have their brand of ball, but if you're the Ravens, if you're a Super Bowl contender, like you have to get off the field there. Like just countless third downs, countless just being, like losing at the point of attack. letting their offensive line dominate and dictate the pace of the game. I want to see them get back on track. And as for the Chiefs, I think getting Xavier Worthy is going to be huge. We really haven't seen him in that offense. He was looking like he was going to be super involved in that game in Brazil before getting knocked out by Kelsey. So like I want to see them get back on track. It's going to be weird seeing one of those teams with a 1-3 record next to their
Yeah.
name, given how they've run the conference the past couple years. But that's the NFL. The margins are so small. That said, one of those teams will be 1-3. I still think both teams are going to make the playoffs at the end of the
Mm,
day. The Ravens I believe they're in a really great position for that division. I think the Chiefs, at the end of the day, if they just make it in, they I mean, they could be 9-8, 10-7, and I still wouldn't want to play them come
yeah.
January.
I
So,
mean, I think it's really interesting actually, because we're talking about the Colts and the fact that they are 3-0, and everyone's saying that they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, but they've played three relatively bad teams, like you mentioned, combined one win. And I'm looking at the Chiefs record and I'm looking at the Ravens record, and everyone's freaking out about it, but they've both played unbelievably difficult schedules so far.
yeah.
And they've won their winnable games and they've lost the games that have been close. They're playing week one, the Chiefs played the Chargers, who have looked like a great team in Brazil. So it was a little bit of a weird game to begin with, but that was a close game. Week two, they play the Eagles, who I personally think are going to win the Super Bowl this year. And then week three, they play the Giants. And yeah, it wasn't a great game, but they still got the win. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters, getting the win. And for the Ravens, like you said, they've been playing some difficult teams. And so I think it's going to be, I think people overreact so quickly to everything that goes on in the first two, three games of the season.
Mhm.
I kind
Yeah.
of I agree with you in the skill perspective that I think
Yeah.
both these teams should make the playoffs. The
Yeah.
question is, if you start 1-3, where does that leave you in
Yeah.
terms of the actual numbers and of it?
Yeah.
How many games do you need to win and where are those wins? Eric, so sorry for that, we got cut off. But that wraps up our first week, our first podcast from the booth. Really excited for where this can go. And got any last words, Eric?
Hell yeah. Good to get the first one under the belt, and we'll see y'all next week. Can't wait.
Yep. We'll see you next week from the booth.